will create jobs here in the United States and will, of course, be subject to all U.S. law and regulation.
Well, Mr. Marcus, I can appreciate that, but isn't it important that Americans trust what you're trying to do, and wouldn't they more likely trust it if it were located in the United States and in some way lightly regulated by American authorities?
They probably would, Congressman, although they will have a relationship with American companies, and as a result, they'll have a trust or not of the different wallets that will operate. And that being said, the goal of the Libra digital currency is also to serve a lot of populations that are not in the U.S., and as a result, we felt that the choice of an international home for the Libra Association was the right decision.
Last question. You understand why American consumers would be concerned that it's not located in the United States and instead located in Switzerland?
Congressman, I think as far as the consumers here in the U.S. are concerned, their funds, if they use an American wallet, will be here, not in Switzerland.
Thank you. I yield back.
The gentleman from North Carolina, the gentlelady from North Carolina, Ms. Adams, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for convening the hearing, and Mr. Marcus, thank you for coming. Like many of my colleagues, I too have grave concerns about Facebook's entry into the financial services industry, and have gained a little more insight, but I do have some questions. And I want to follow up on Ms. Ocasio-Cortez and ask you to explain a little bit more how a company becomes a member of the Libra Association. Can you just give me a brief answer? I have several I want to ask you.
Of course, Congresswoman. So there are sets of criteria that have been established and that are public. And any company or organization meeting these
thank you for
criteria
convening
can
the hearing, and
join
Marcus, thank you
the
for coming.
association as a member. This is a process that
Like
is now being
many
led
of my
by the
colleagues,
Libra
I too
Association.
have
the process
grave concerns about Facebook's entry
Yes,
into the financial services
So
industry.
can a wealthy individual
have gained a
investor
little more
become a member?
insight, but I do
No,
have some
Congresswoman,
questions.
because the
I want to follow up
criteria
on
has
Ms.
different buckets.
Ocasio-Cortez
So it's either
and ask you
corporations
to explain a little bit
that
more
are
how a
active
company
in,
becomes a
delivering
member
services or
of the
companies
Libra
in the
Association.
blockchain
Right,
area.
okay,
or-
so let me move on.
Can
So
you just
consumers
give me a
can't either then?
brief answer? I have several I want to
Congresswoman,
ask you.
all consumers will be able to use Libra. There are
That's
set.
not what I asked. So can they become a member of the Libra Association? No, they cannot.
No, Congresswoman.
All right. So, it costs at
criteria
least, what,
that,
$10 million to become a
have been
member of the
established and that are
association?
public. Congresswoman,
and
this is
any
not
company
a cost.
or organization
Members will
will
have to
Yeah,
invest in
and,
these
thank you for
criteria to
convening
ensure
the
that
hearing,
it
and
is properly
Marcus, thank you
funded.
for
But that's an
coming.
entry fee.
As a member, this is a
it is not a
process
fee,
that
Like
Congresswoman
many
has
of my
invested in
colleagues,
these
I
associations.
too
So
have
is the process
grave concerns about
public?
Facebook's
Okay,
entry
let me,
into the financial services
so
industry.
can a wealthy circle back
Individual
on
gained a little more
Members,
insight, but I do
line
have
of
some
questioning,
questions.
because the,
Why would any of the
follow up
companies in the
criteria,
Libra Association
has,
make
Ms.
different,
Ocasio-Cortez
buckets.
make an investment like this?
It's either
and ask you
corporations,
to explain a little bit
that
more
are
how a
active.
company
Congresswoman,
becomes
I
a member
believe
of
in my
the
conversations
Libra
with all of them that they
Association.
agree with us
Okay,
that
so
the
let me
status
move
quo
on.
is
So
not
consumers
working
can't
for too
either
many
then.
people, and that people deserve better, they deserve lower cost, and they deserve a lower barrier of entry to digital money, and that is why they have joined. And then, of course, they have their own goals that are business goals, because they believe that if lower costs...
Okay, let me reclaim my time and move on then. As a free service, Facebook's business model relies primarily on advertising and its marketing platform to make a profit. 2017, 90% of Facebook's $40 billion in revenue came from digital ads and user data, and that is the core business model. Is that correct?
Of Facebook, the
Yes.
company, Congresswoman, yes, it is.
Okay, so you expect us to believe that you're going to start collecting financial data and not share it because you promised not to do that?
Yes, Congresswoman, and as well because there will be many other wallets that we will have to compete with that are not active in social media or advertising, and as a result, we will have to make good on those commitments.
Okay, what, if anything, has been learned from the Cambridge Analytical scandal that other data hacks that have occurred on Facebook's platform? What, if anything, have you learned?
Oh, Congresswoman, we've learned a lot, we have now tighter controls on data. We have tighter controls on keeping the data from people using our services safe. We have tighter controls on election integrity, and we have invested greatly in election integrity and in ads transparency.
Well, I would be interested in what the steps are when you say tighter control. Can you give me an example? Got 45 seconds.
Congresswoman, yes. For instance, what happened with Cambridge Analytica, the way the platform was open back then, is not possible anymore on the Facebook platform today.
Okay, so how much has the Facebook invested in the formation of Libra, Calibra, and the Libra investment token that will earn a share of interest?
Congresswoman, this investment hasn't happened yet. We're in the phase of ratifying the charter with other members of the association, and then members can decide how much they want to invest, and we will take part in that process like every other member.
Thank you, sir. Madam Chair, I yield back.
The gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Gonzalez, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Marcus, for being here. I'm going to jump right in. So I think what today's discussion is really about is trust and whether we can trust your company. I think you're pretty low on the trust spectrum currently for very good reason. But essentially, what we're talking about on the association side is the governing body of Libra, correct?
Yes, Congressman.
Okay. And of the members today, how many did you hand select?
I'm sorry.
How many did you recruit? How many did Facebook recruit?
Congressman, we approached a wide range of companies.
But how many did you approve of? 100% of them?
Congressman, they met the criteria and they had the willingness to participate. When we get to the 100,
But you got them,
we will
right?
not be in the process. We will not be involved in the decision of who gets to join or
Okay,
not.
but to date, you've recruited all members, correct?
Congressman, we've approached a number of companies. Those are the companies that
I think the answer is yes, so we'll keep going. You created the coding language. Most decisions to date have been made by your company. The claim has been that you will not, Facebook, have undue influence over the platform. We're all politicians in this room. I think if we could hand select our voters, we'd feel pretty comfortable about our ability to influence whatever decisions are made. So I would suggest that that's not an accurate claim. Secondly, there's something glaringly missing from the group, which are everyday users. Why would you exclude users from having voting authority over the association?
Congressman, first, I do want to correct one fact, which is, yes, we've created and invested in all of the code up to this point, but now it is in the open source community and available to be contributed.
Yep.
And on the consumer's question, it's because we believe that to meet our regulatory requirements across the association, we need entities that are established, that know how to operate those types of programs, that are trusted. But this is also why we believe that over time it is important to have a transition to giving people more of a voice in.
We'll talk about that in a second. Quickly, on the membership side, you have to be able to validate. You need a $10 million investment. Can a Chinese state-owned enterprise get in?
Sorry, I couldn't.
Can a Chinese state-owned enterprise get into the membership?
Congressman, this is not my decision. It's the Libra Association decision, but there's
Which
a key
you have
principle.
undue influence over.
There's a key principle, which is that if Libra is not accepted in a certain country or can't be used, I believe that companies for said country shouldn't be part of the.
So the answer is maybe. Now I want to talk about how you're actually going to transition, right? So I want to know how you actually do this, because the promise of a permissionless system is the decentralization. It seems like if you're fully decentralized, you wouldn't actually need the Libra Association. So help me square those two. They seem to be in conflict.
You're right, Congressman, to raise this important point. And the way that we're thinking about this is that since Libra will always have to have a reserve, that it will be back 1-to-1. There will be some form of centralization in the management of the reserve, because we will need the right oversight to ensure that it is managed appropriately to retain stability. And as a result, We believe that there will still be an association that will not only look after the key principles to operate the network within the bounds of regulation and ensuring that proper programs are around, but that doesn't mean that the governance and the voting has to be the same as today. And so I think we can achieve the balance of having more openness. And to me, the key issue with a permissionless network is the ability to have nodes be more fungible and as a result ensure the integrity of the network over a long system.
I actually think this is the hardest thing for you. I don't actually think it'll occur, frankly. If I had to predict, I just don't think it'll occur because they're just fundamentally in conflict. Talk to crypto purists or blockchain purists, these things don't match. So I don't think it'll happen. I think what we're most likely to see is a 100-member organization that you guys basically control, which frankly, I love the innovation, but that scares me, if I'm being honest. And then the last point on Libra specifically, quick question. It's the only wallet that will be directly integrated to Facebook?
Congressman, it will be interoperable with other wallets.
It's directly integrated.
Calibra wallet will be integrated in WhatsApp and Messenger, alongside with other wallets for traditional fiat payments.
Right, and so as a fully controlled company of Facebook, subsidiary of Facebook, the argument that you won't be sharing data, I'd imagine you share data between Facebook, the big blue app, Instagram, and Messenger. I'd be shocked if you're not also sharing at some point with Calibra and Facebook. I hear you, we promise we'll do this. Back to what I said at the beginning, nobody trusts you right now. Oh, sorry, I yield back.
The gentlewoman from Pennsylvania, Ms. Dean, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for being here before us. What I'd like to do is, with a focus on that notion of trust, number one, by your comments that you said we don't need to trust you. I think this Facebook because there are 28 other partners, eventually 99 other partners in the association. No, we do need to trust you. We absolutely. So before we look forward to the possibility of Libra, why don't we look back and take a look at the record $5 billion recommended fine against Facebook. Could you be very specific, not euphemistic, but very specific as to the wrongdoing that generated a $5 billion recommended fine?
Congresswoman, first, I do agree absolutely that trust is essential and that Facebook should be trusted. What I meant in my comments is that even if you don't, you won't need to because Facebook will not have outsized power or governance over the network.
I wonder maybe if you would answer the other piece of my question, which was it's tough to trust when the collection, storage, and misuse of information of your users generated a $5 billion recommended fine. Can you be specific? So what have you learned? What has Facebook learned? What is the specific wrongdoing for which you are being fined?
Congresswoman, I can't comment on the FTC investigation because it is not yet public, but what I can tell you is what we've learned. And what we've learned is that we cannot launch services and then figure out how it can or cannot be misused. We have to take steps in order to ensure that what we launch is actually
You can't be more specific than that? When the very thing that you're putting before us today, a preformed association, is the exact same idea of what you just talked about? Putting something forward without really testing it all first?
Congresswoman, nothing is launched and nothing will launch until all concerns are addressed. I made that
Again, Facebook had to learn some lessons that you can actually say in open testimony to the public as to the wrongdoing and the misuse of information. Please assure us that Facebook has the ability to say so now.
Yes, Congresswoman, we have made mistakes, it is true.
What are those mistakes? So that we can learn and make sure that you have learned.
We have made mistakes around how to best protect consumers' data and privacy. We have been working on getting better at those
Did
things.
you share consumers' data in unauthorized ways?
Congresswoman, there were a number of issues, and we made
So the
a
answer is
certain number
yes.
of mistakes.
Thank you.
And
The answer is yes. In connection with that, fine, consider this. The FTC's investigation was set off by a New York Times and Observer of London, a report which uncovered that Facebook, the social network, allowed Cambridge Analytica, a British consulting firm, to the Trump campaign to harvest personal information to its users. Do you find that incredibly troubling?
Yes, Congresswoman, but those things are not possible anymore on the Facebook
But they
platform
were possible and they took place.
because we reacted too slowly, but this is not
You
the
allowed the harvesting of information for the Trump campaign. Is that correct?
Congresswoman, I don't have the details.
Thank you. It's apparent that the reporting shows so. Let's flip to the other side. So I think before you move on to Libra, you ought to clean up the messes of the past and be very transparent. The opaqueness is not working. Let's talk about this. This is structured as a nonprofit, and yet we know that you're going to take dividends or interest and then distribute it out to the association members. Is that correct?
Congresswoman, yes, this is correct.
Will that be dividends and income?
Congresswoman, for whatever streams of income the association will pay out and not keep, because it is a nonprofit, it will not generate a profit for itself. It will pay appropriate taxes. And I do want to say that I completely agree with your statement that this process cannot be opaque. It has to be in the open, and this is exactly why we've shared our plans so openly.
And yet you had trouble being transparent about the past, so I do worry about the future. What is the projected income that will be generated, the interest that will be generated, say, in the first year? Certainly you have some timelines, a first year, a second year, a third year. What's the income you're anticipating for Facebook?
Congresswoman, we're not optimizing for that. What we're optimizing for...
I don't want to talk about optimizing.
Congresswoman...
I want to talk really hard facts, numbers that people can dig into, because I don't think the simple example you gave of the young woman trying to send $200 and you guys are just on a mission to help her send money to her mother in a war-torn country really explains why would you want to get into this business. It's got to be for profit. Where is the profit?
Congresswoman, we've done that for communications for the very same woman you were describing. Now she can communicate with her family for free using our products. It wasn't the case
Time.
before those products were available.
No, you
Thank you
didn't
so
answer
much.
my question.
Time's up. The gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Hollingsworth, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Marcus. I appreciate you being here and investing some time with us and talking about these things. I wondered if you might take a deep breath, take a step back. This is something that you are clearly passionate about and that you clearly believe in. I wonder if you might tell us kind of what that North Star is. And I know you've said it many times here, but I wondered if you might say it again, kind of why are you so passionate about this? Who is this going to help, and how is it going to make a difference to that person?
Thank you for that opportunity, Congressman. I'm passionate about this because too many people are left behind. The costs are too high. And the very people who are left behind are people who can't afford to be left behind. So the less you have, the more you pay within our current financial system. And the more you need to depend on digital money and free or very low cost services to move your money around, the less access you have. And so we believe that advancing technology and building the ability for people with a simple $40 smartphone and a basic data plan to have access to digital money services would be a huge progress for many people who need it the most.
Right. Well, certainly the fields of Indiana are far from Silicon Valley, but that is exactly something that they can sympathize with. The feeling as though they are on the outside of the financial system or marginally hanging on to the financial system, or that the costs of using the financial system are very high to them. That's something that I hear every day all the way across the district, and it's something that's really important to them. This committee over a number of years has done a lot of great work in trying to right-size some of the regulatory framework, trying to help participants get into the market, trying to enable and empower those Hoosiers or Americans and those around the world that you mentioned as well. So if the architecture of this is to be a transaction-oriented platform, right, tell me a little bit how that differs from a cryptocurrency, right? Because this is really a digital currency versus a cryptocurrency, and the architecture is very different. I wanted to talk about that for a second.
Congressman, there are two parts that are different.
Yes.
The first one is really the digital currency itself, because it is backed one for one with a very stable reserve that
Correct.
will confer stability to the digital currency.
So that when you pay something, right, you know what the value is that you're paying. And
Libra wallet, we, of course, will need to authenticate consumers before they can open an account. But there will be no other data than the actual transaction data that is needed to serve the purpose of the wallet.
What other data will Facebook monetize apart from the transaction data?
Congressman, we will not monetize transactional or account data, nor share it even with Facebook itself.
Okay, we've learned that Facebook has repeatedly allowed third-party users access to data without Facebook's users' consent. Now Facebook promises that its Calibra subsidiary will not share data with Facebook. How can we be sure that this policy will not change in the future, and what would enshrine this promise that you've made?
Congressman, it's a very fair question, and I understand that people have concerns and commitments have been made, and here there's one thing that will be very different, which is that if we fail to earn people's trust and fail to deliver on our commitments, then they will not use the Calibra wallet. We will have portability built in, and we will have the ability for anyone to use any of the many wallets that will be available that will all be interoperable. And if we don't make good on commitments, and if we don't earn people's trust by making good on these commitments for very long periods of time, we cannot actually win. We do want the Calibra wallets to be successful, and as a result, we will have to make good on these commitments.
Thank you. I yield back, Madam Chair.
The gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Riegelman, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here, Mr. Marcus. And one more time, since you can see I'm usually close to last in these proceedings, what was your title one more time as we go forward?
My title is I'm the head of Calibra at Facebook.
At Calibra at Facebook. So I have some questions, and we're going to get right into it because we've had enough getting going on here. So my first question is, after a white paper, there's usually an implementation plan. And do you foresee all of your partners being involved with the implementation plan for Libra or for Calibra? And once in place, can we as partners in the U.S. government look at the regulatory side of this as we go forward?
Congressman, yes, this is my commitment that we will not go forward until we've addressed all concerns and met the regulatory bar and oversight bar that is needed for this network to operate the right way.
Yes, sir. You might have answered this, but are the partners right now involved in the open source development of Libra and its applications?
Congressman, some of them are stepping up and are actually starting to be involved in the development, and I expect that since we just open sourced the code base about 4 weeks ago, that we will have a lot of outside contributions going forward.
So that was my surprise. So I took a little bit of a look at Libra Core, right? Sort of the JavaScript front end that you're going to do that actually accesses the back end, which is Rust, right? That helps with the actual transactions. And I know it's very, very new, but what surprised me, it looks like there's already an international flavor to it. I think Rust is 37 people in San Francisco, so I went ahead and did a GitHub search on who's actually leading the development on the Libra Core side. And it looks like, I think it's going to be international because it looks like a native Nigerian that's actually building the actual Libra Core in front of the code development of Libra Core. So when I look at things, from an intelligence background, I wonder about, is this going to be international? Is there going to be scalability issues? Because we look at the number of transactions that you're doing right now. But I was really surprised by the Rust language as it was in the background. So my first question is why was the Rust language chosen as the implementation language for Libra? And do you believe right now, from what you've seen, do you believe that's mature enough to handle the issues and the security challenges that'll really affect these large cryptocurrency transactions?
Congressman, excellent question on the security of the code and who can commit to the code. And the Libra Association will own the repository for the code, and as a result, while there are many flavors and branches being developed by third parties, only safe, verified code will actually be committed to the actual Libra core base that is going to be under the governance of the Libra Association.
And that's what I really am hoping, because right now, and when I was looking at the nightly build releases, it looks like Libra was built on nightly builds of the Rust programming language. And it's because it's a little interesting because that's not how we usually did releases in the DoD. And I was wondering what features of Rust are only available in the nightly builds, and this is something you can get back to me on. What features are only available in the nightly builds that aren't in the official release? This is just a function of the prototyping phase of this.
Congressman, I don't have all the answers to your very technical questions, but I commit that we will get back to you with more details on your question once my technical team can get back to you.
Yeah, and really some of this is not just based on technical questions, but the international applicability, of Libra. So for instance, we just had the 8 members of the major banks sitting here, and their issue was information sharing based on laws that we have in place right now and the confusion over sharing that data with foreign subsidiaries. And I'll link it into this. If we already have those laws on the books, and if we're looking at CFT, if we're looking at AML, based on my background, that's some of the things that concern me. And also with scalability, you're looking at large transactions and blocks, I think, that maybe have never been done before, and you can probably agree that's probably need the white paper and the open source development. But when you're looking at the issues that you have for regulatory, especially for AML, I think the problem for me is we got to look at this as an international problem, because I think eventually you're going to have international wallets. I think wallets will be built around the world, and I think that's something that we're going towards, and that's why the scalability question, who's actually doing this, who's partnering in this is very concerning to me, and it's really easy to access these individuals on GitHub and to see, that if somebody from Lagos, Nigeria is the main code writer for one of these instances, it's something that concerns me just based on my background.
Address that the Libra Association, as a governance body, will actually validate committers to the code, and will make sure to be very thoughtful about who can commit to the code. And I'd be happy to follow up with your office on details.
And at the end, I think many members, bipartisan-wise, would love to see an implementation plan built on top of the white paper. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Congressman.
The gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Garcia, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, sir, for being here. I know it's been a long day, and I think the end is almost in sight. But I must tell you, I have some real concerns about your premise that you're really doing this order or paycheck to paycheck, cash only consumers. How is that really going to help? I mean, how are they going to really have access to something like this and be able to negotiate what I think could be a very complex system?
Congresswoman, thank you for your question. The reason in America that people remain on the fringes of the system is because the costs are too high. And
The cost of the phones and data plans are also high. Are you going to work with your Facebook Foundation to provide more connectivity for people around those areas that don't have access to mobile plans?
Congresswoman, the focus of Calibra is really on the financial side and enabling people to have digital money. But the costs of smartphones and data plans are coming down as a result of competition.
Why would they need digital money if they can get that $20 bill that my colleague was showing off at the other end?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I said, why would they want digital money if they can get the green dollars?
Congresswoman, they would, because probably they need to send a portion of that money to someone in another country or on the other side of the country, and the ability for them to access these.
Well, let's go to that example that you used $200 that somebody wants to send, and I think you said it would be I forget. Did you say $14? I guess you're talking about either a money order or some sort of wire transfer.
A cross-border remittance or
Right.
payment.
So in that, they can do that fairly quickly, and they can do it without any advertisement. They can do it without any other charges. So the consumer is the decider of what's going to happen.
Number, but
20 million, 30 million, 40 million, 100 million?
we've invested what's required, and I think that's why
Well,
it
so
is
you're
a
not going
good.
to tell me how much you invested, but you're trying to convince me that there's not going to be a time that you're going to want to recoup that investment.
Yes, we will, Congresswoman,
And how will you do that without
into-
charging people, charging for ads, or charging the person that, in my view, you're using for your agenda to get, I don't even know what to call what you all do. I mean, it sounds almost something straight out of the a Dan Brown novel, we belong to the Libra, we get to decide.
Congresswoman,
You know-
if I may answer your question,
I want you to be more transparent. with
I
us.
want to be more transparent, and I want to tell you what's in it for Facebook, if you give me 1 minute.
Well, you've got 20 seconds.
Okay, I'll
'cause
do it
that's
in
all I
20.
have.
Billions of users who are currently on our various products to transact with one another. And if they can suddenly transact with one another, some of those businesses cannot even accept digital payments today. So the idea that there's more commerce on the platform will actually drive those small businesses to expand. And as they expand, they'll buy more ads on the Facebook platform, and that will be an indirect way for Facebook to benefit. The second way that we will benefit is that over time, if we earn people's trust and they use the Calibra wallet, we will offer a range of services, lower cost access to capital and others in partnerships with banks and financial institutions. And this will be another source of revenue for the company that is completely decorrelated from
Can
ads.
suddenly transact with
But
one
that
another.
is,
Some of those
in
businesses
many
cannot
areas.
even
So
accept
those are the
digital
two
payments
ways that
today.
Facebook will
So
benefit
the
from,
idea that there's
the
more
Libra
commerce on the
network is-
platform will actually
Okay,
drive
thank you.
those small businesses
One
to
of my
expand.
general thoughts
And,
surrounding
as
the
they expand, they'll
blockchain
buy more
space
ads on the
comes down
Facebook.
to a simple dichotomy. Either the crypto tokenization blockchain space will be a valuable innovation in the long term, or it isn't a particularly valuable innovation. If the former is true, then it is important that the U.S. creates as certain a regulatory environment or regime as possible. By creating regulatory certainty, the value of the growth in this space can be captured here in the United States, whether that value be in job creation or the creation of intellectual property or other benefits. If the latter is true, and this is not a particularly Taxonomy Act, there are still many questions to answer in this space, but the goal of the Token Taxonomy Act is one that is quite laudable. Not all blockchains are created equal, and we as a committee and a Congress should discuss the nuances of distributed ledgers versus blockchains, permission versus permissionless blockchains, and utility tokens like Filecoin versus cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. When Switzerland has previously outlined clear regulatory guidelines for the industry.
Regulatory clarity in Switzerland was just one of the components, but yes, it was factored in the decision.
Libra strikes me as being very similar to a currency ETF, both in that its value is derived from a basket of currencies, and the way the basket is managed seems to operate much like an ETF. If this is true, perhaps it should be regulated by the SEC. Perhaps this is a mischaracterization. The point is that we need to carefully study the mechanisms of any new innovation in this field to understand how they should be regulated. Leveraging existing regulatory agencies like the CFTC, the SEC, state agencies makes sense, but it is our job here in Congress to write laws that make it very clear who will regulate the ultimate, or who will be the ultimate regulator of a potential product. It's Congress's job to give the SEC clear rules that they can interpret and apply. The SEC is doing its best, but they are stuck applying a litany of very old rules to 21st century technology. We need to help them succeed by providing some updated guidance. That is the only way we are going to ensure that any development in this space is safe and sound and occurs right here in the most innovative economy in the world. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. Without objection, I'd like to enter into the record the following materials. A letter from the Electronic Privacy Information Center, EPIC, Diversity in Blockchain's initial review of Facebook's project, Libra, a letter from the Independent Community Bankers of America, a letter from Americans for Financial Reform Education Fund, a New York Times op-ed written by Chris Hughes, the co-founder of Facebook, entitled "It's Time to Break Up Facebook," another op-ed by the same person in the Financial Times entitled "Facebook Co-founder Libra Coin Would Shift Power into the Wrong Hands." With that, I'd like to recognize myself for 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Marcus, for joining us. A lot of people have been using the word innovation. That is a bit misleading. I think what this is really about is making more money, owning people's information,
Americans
owning
for
their
Financial
identification,
Reform
owning their
Education
person,
Fund,
which
a New
for all
York
of which,
Times op-ed written by Chris
very much is
Hughes
interconnected
uses,
with the
the
livelihood
co-founder
of the
of
residents we represent.
Facebook entitled "It's Time
Mr.
to
Marcus,
Break Up
how
Facebook."
or who picked the first
Another
28
op-ed by the same
corporations
person in the Financial
of the Libra
Times
Association?
entitled "Facebook co-founder Libra coin would shift
Congresswoman,
power into the wrong hands."
Original 28 members are a
With that, I'd
result
like to
of
recognize
wide
myself for
outreach,
5
and those are the
minutes.
first
Thank you,
out
Mr.
of
Marcus, for
100.
joining us.
Facebook
A lot of
will
people have
not
been using the
be
word
in a position
innovation.
to pick and choose next members and will not be involved in the process. This is a process that is actually now driven and solely in the hands of the Libra Association.
Thank you, Mr. Marcus. So is it Andreessen? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes, Congresswoman
So
Mark Andreessen.
Mark Andreessen sits on the board of Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of Facebook, sits on the board of Breakthrough Initiatives. Peter Thiel is the founder of PayPal and the board of Facebook and on the board of Facebook. Ben Horowitz is the founder of Anderson Horowitz and on the board of Lyft. Just looking at that, simply looking at the small sample of individuals, there appears to be multiple close relationships on Facebook's board and across the Libra Association members. Recently, Forbes asked the following question: is Facebook forming a crypto mafia as Libra Foundation members boost each other's businesses? I'm sorry, Mr. McHenry's low is distracting. One example they provided is that Anchorage, or one of Libra Association founding members, raised funding from Visa, who is also Libra Association's founding member. You don't think that that creates a power imbalance for a small group of people to manage a high percentage of the world's transactions? Are you worried about undue influence?
Congresswoman, I appreciate your question. I can assure you that the participants up to this point are participants that have joined because they can add value on the network and provide services that are relevant to the people we serve.
No, I'm sure they're valuable, Mr. Marcus. No one, I think, would oppose that they're valuable. But each of the Libra Association companies have investors or shareholders to answer to. So how do you see them serving two masters in a competing payments world?
Congresswoman, we hope that the Libra network is just a network and that every single company will be able to build services on top of the network the same way that companies build services on top of the internet. And as a result, we believe that conflicts will be limited by that. And the fact that, 100 members is by the time we launch.
Yes.
But we hope that we'll have many more. And again,
So can a member of the Libra Association, the group of friends, be voted out by Libra users?
Congresswoman, no, this is not currently contemplated, but the way that the governance will evolve will allow for that in the future.
Mr. Marcus, and this is important, the banked and the founding members have a choice to protect their data, but will the unbanked and underbanked have to trade their data and privacy to transact?
They will not, Congresswoman.
How is that possible?
Because this is a payments network and a payments service, Congresswoman, and that consumers will have choices. And if they want to use a wallet that is solely in the business of payments and not in the business of advertising at all, they'll have the choice.
One of the barriers for the unbanked community, as you probably know, is access to an ID. So if the same Know Your Customer, anti-money laundering restrictions exist here, then for the Libra network and the wallet, how will this serve the unbanked now?
Congresswoman, this is a very important question, problem of identification for financial inclusion. And this is something that we are actively working on with a number of outside NGOs and others to find the best approach. But there are a number of people who have the ability to identify themselves and who are left behind today, and we can serve them today.
So the public manages large cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin, as you probably heard. However, with the Libra, each founding member had to pay a minimum of $10 million to join and become a validator, or whatever, nod operator, thus each founding member gaining one vote in the Libra Association Council. How does the Libra Association reflect the diverse population you are trying to reach, including the underbanked and unbanked?
This is a really important question, Congresswoman, and the way that we plan to arrive to the right level of diversity and representation is by being very thoughtful at the Libra Association as we add more members towards the goal of 100 or more members by the time the network launches.
Thank you, Mr. Marcus. Now I'd like to recognize the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Steele, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I appreciate you being here. I've been listening to today's testimony. I appreciate you guys innovating, bringing forward a white paper, having this discussion about how to properly regulate what's a new idea. I think some of the conversation today has drifted a bit where people are coming after as if you launched this product and now we're upset that you did that without the regulatory framework in place. I commend you for the fact that you brought forward a white paper. You're discussing the idea. We're having the conversation today so we can be ready tomorrow if you choose to move forward with this. In particular, in listening to the discussion today, I think it's clear that Libra exists characteristics of many different things for which we have a regulatory construct for. We've discussed, should Libra be viewed as a currency, as a security, an ETC, a money market fund, et cetera. And whatever concrete institution ultimately emerges from this first draft of the white paper, I think and you've stated, you don't dispute the fact, at some level it's going to be regulated and you're open to that. You also signaled that there's deficiencies in the U.S. regulatory approach, and that was part of the decision-making process to locate the Libra Association in Switzerland and not in the United States or in Silicon Valley, and under more clear U.S. jurisdiction. And for me, if America doesn't lead in the digital world, others will. And I'm concerned about the values that some of these others might bring to the table, where I feel confident in the values that the United States regulatory approach will bring. And so can I ask you the question, how, not if, because I think we've answered that it should be regulated, but how should we regulate Libra, Calibra, the Libra Association, to be thoughtful about this in the context of policymakers?
Congressman, thank you for the question. There is one important point, which is that the clarity of regulation was definitely one of the factors for Switzerland, but one out of many.
Sure.
I do think that we would have had the ability from a regulatory framework to do that in the United States, but it is less clear, to your point, what the framework would be. That being said, as far as the Calibra wallet is concerned, it is very clear. We are registered as a money service business with FinCEN and with Treasury. We have state licenses that we're obtaining and continuing to obtain, and so there's total clarity there. And I believe that where we need more clarity is really around the Libra Association and how the reserve is managed. And even for that point, there's just no clear regulation right now, even in Switzerland or elsewhere. And this is why the engagement that we're having with the G7 working group, the Financial Stability Board, and others, the conversation that we're having, we hope will result in some form of oversight, especially over the reserve, because this is something that a lot of people have concerns about. I have concerns about ensuring that commitments are bound by law when it comes to the reserve, and that is the commitment we're making, that we will take the time to find
and I appreciate that. And the reason I'm digging in on the regulatory approach is from a policymaker perspective, the area that I can have most influence on is that regulatory framework. We've noted a couple times, I think, in your testimony that you don't look to be regulated as a securities by the SEC. Can I ask, is there anything specific as it relates to our securities laws that concern you if you fell under the regulation or the Howey test in our SEC regulation that we should be looking at today to be prepared for tomorrow?
Congressman, I don't believe we are a security because we're not managed.
Not whether or not you are, but remove that, because I think that'll be debated for days and months to come. But is there anything in the securities law that gives you pause that makes you not want to fall under the Howey test?
Certainly, because as far as Libra is concerned, it's a payment tool, and we want it to be accessible to everyone. This is not going to be an investment, and if it wasn't available to everyone, then it wouldn't be able to deliver on its mission.
I think that note is helpful about how our securities law limits people's access into some of the investment products that we have in the United States, and it would have a significant impact into the product that you're looking to deliver. Can I ask you, I want to shift gears slightly.
I do want to say, and I know the gentleman from Wisconsin is new, but I would respectfully remind him that that is exactly what Facebook did when they came in, without a regulatory framework, without even a white paper. That's how they operate. The mantra for Facebook was move fast and break things. That was their mantra when they got into business. They also...
Will the gentleman yield for a moment?
No, I've got limited time here. I would add that they also have taken an approach to business that rather than ask permission, they just apologize later. And that's what they've done over and over and over again with the personal data of their customers. Their current business model, and thank you for coming, is to really use an adhesion contract, 18 pages, that basically authorizes Facebook to vacuum up the behavioral surplus, all of the information about their users, and then they sell it or they deploy it on behalf of their advertisers. That's the model that you have. And I'm just worried that you're going to use the same model for Calibra. What's the terms of service agreement going to look like here? Is it going to be you click I agree and then all your rights are gone? Is that, because that's the model you have with Facebook, right?
Congressman, if you give me the opportunity, I do want to
Well,
talk about
you do, but really quick. You got to.
Thank you.
We only have so much time here.
So first, I do want to defend the advertising business model that Facebook has. It enables people.
No,
around
I'm
the
asking
world
about Calibra. I'm asking about what you're going to do. What's the terms of service agreement going to look like? Is this going to be another adhesion contract?
No, Congressman, and we will not share data, financial data and account data, even with Facebook itself, Congressman.
Okay, you haven't had a good record on that. Let me ask you a couple of questions. So, according to ProPublica, you got about 52,000 data points on every one of your regular users on Facebook. Is that right?
I don't have the exact answer to that question.
Well, that's what they have. I think they're right. We feel that the ability of this to scale is really where the dangers come in. You've got 2.7 billion customers. When you come in, if this scales, and it's designed to scale, right, that we are worried that, and not just us in Congress, but Jay Powell over at the Fed, Secretary Mnuchin, they're concerned of the impact it would have on monetary policy and the strength of the dollar. Is this something that could be tested in a sandbox environment, in a smaller environment where we don't have to worry about those scaling problems affecting the economy more broadly, or the strength of the U.S. dollar?
Congressman, the first point I would like to make is that
would you commit to doing this in a sandbox environment so that we don't have to worry about the regulatory issues and the privacy issues? We would have a chance to look at your product, and it is a product. You got a token here. That way, we'd be able to answer some of the regulatory questions. Are you willing to commit to that?
Congressman, I commit that we will take the time to address all concerns and to ensure that we do this the right way.
In a sandbox environment.
Congressman, I don't want to get into the specifics.
Well, that's what I'm asking
now,
you for.
but-
That's what I'm asking you for.
But my commitment to you is that we will take the time. We will not move fast on this. We will.
The commitment that you're going to take your time is not, first of all, is not the way you've operated in the past. And it's meaningless. It's meaningless. If I tell you I'm going to take my time, what is that? What is that? That's just an indication of pace. Doesn't mean you're going to do anything different than we want you to do. And I would just be, it looks to me like you're going to right from day one, you're going to be a systemically important financial institution. And so you should be ready for that regulation coming at you on day one, the way you're operating right now, the lack of transparency. Let me ask you, so Facebook hasn't done privacy very well. Would you commit to accepting fiduciary duty, a fiduciary duty on behalf of the private.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Okay. Thank you. I thank the chair. Thank you.
The gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Emmer, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Marcus, I've heard some incredibly uninformed comments from members of Congress today and yesterday. As I'm sure you're aware, Bitcoin is now 10 years old, and now suddenly, magically, Congress is responding. In other words, after more than a decade, Congress has apparently started to care. I'm glad after all these years that Congress has finally decided to pay attention to the technology that could again, just like the internet, upend the way we do everything in our lives. Unfortunately, some people want to unnecessarily restrict it or even ban it. They fear change. Nothing has been more clear on this committee than the blind aversion to change that some of our members have constantly espoused, even when it wasn't required or even the subject of the hearing. I'm amazed at how easily representatives from California are so willing to suppress the innovation occurring in their own state. And as much as they would like to be a separate country, the benefits those innovations could have for these United States. I don't want to be partisan. This is not a partisan technology. In fact, Representative Bill Foster, a co-chair of the Blockchain Caucus like myself, has been a longtime champion and advocate for these innovations. It has never been a cornerstone of my grandfather's Democrat Party to oppose innovation. Chairwoman Waters was in fact correct when she began this hearing that merely learning more about and understanding Libra does not have to include opposing it. I hope that will be the same approach to understanding the breadth and depth of cryptocurrency, which Libra does not represent, but thankfully amplifies our discussion of that topic. Unfortunately, Mr. Marcus, you and your company have decided to approach this undertaking with as equal a level of ignorance and misunderstanding as those who wish to quell any new developments in cryptocurrency. I'm afraid you have failed to realize that there is much to do in Washington in terms of educating both members of Congress and regulators on the benefits of this technology. I hope someone whose opinion you value conveys to you how wrong you've been operating. People have concerns with the amount of data you have on them, and now you want to be their money too. I hope members of this committee investigate the fact that, quote, the people already have options separate from your central control. My colleagues are incredibly fearful of the money laundering and criminal activity in cryptocurrencies, but the dollar and all fiat-backed currencies have been proven to be the largest means of illicit behavior and money laundering. This does not mean we need to suppress individual freedom. Individuals insistent on the exclusion of middlemen and the freedom of the individual will continue to create open networks separate from central control. Unfortunately, Libra is not designed to minimize middlemen. It, in fact, relies on them. At the end of this day, Libra presents an incredible opportunity to define what it is not. It presents an incredible opportunity for everyone on this committee to learn more about actual cryptocurrencies. The committee has already sent out a press release that this is only our first step in regulation of oversight of Libra. A lot has been said about the concern that the payment systems are unregulated. However, payment systems like the one you propose are already subject to regulation by a number of agencies. I think it's important that my colleagues have a full understanding of the law as it currently exists so that we may make better decisions here. Treasury, as demonstrated by Secretary Mnuchin on Monday, regulates payment systems for anti-money laundering compliance. The FTC regulates them for fraud. Each state regulates them for consumer protection, among other things. New York has its own specific regime, and so forth. This regulatory landscape applies to payment systems like Libra and is different and distinct from laws that may or may not apply to typical social media platforms. When this hearing was announced, I was optimistic that this was finally the time a major company wanted to be involved with this revolution, and that the majority wanted to actually think and learn about these new innovations. It appears, however, they have decided to entrench themselves in the fear of the unknown and the fear of change, and your company has done nothing to allay these fears. As you move forward, acknowledging that the bill to ban your actions has no constitutional basis, let alone a basis in logic, and that no one is willing to actually put their name on this proposal to ban private innovation, will you work with me and invest educational efforts to show these members of Congress that we should work to better understand the innovations underlying cryptocurrency rather than doing their best to put their head in the sand and ignore change?
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, who is also the chair of the Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Marcus, I'm concerned about the dollar. As you know, there is a competition for currency supremacy. The dollar is the preferred currency in the world. The yen competes, the euro competes, and there are others. But the question I have for you is this: how will this impact the dollar? This is our currency. The dollar is the means by which we have the opportunity to influence the economic order in the world. How will this impact the dollar?
Congressman, the first thing that I want to state is that we are not competing, or we do not want to compete with the dollar and
The question is not whether you want to compete with the dollar. The question is, what impact will you have on the dollar? The dollar is supreme. Do we give up our supremacy because of a cryptocurrency?
No, Congressman, and we're engaged in conversations, notably with the Fed and the Financial Stability Board, to explore how we can ensure that the dollar and monetary policy is not influenced at all by...
Well, here is a concern. Things tend to metamorphose. Things rarely remain stagnant. We live in a dynamic world. You're starting out with just a small piece of the economy, as it were. We don't know what this will become. Surely you can understand the consternation of people who are charged with the responsibility of overseeing the Fed, which happens to be the means by which we have influence with our economy and the dollar. So we have this consternation, and I would greatly appreciate it if you could allay some of my consternation with reference to the impact that this may have on the dollar.
Congressman, the reserve will be composed mainly of dollars, and we expect that a number of...
Excuse me, sorry to be rude, crude, and unrefined. Please forgive me, okay, but my time is limited. You said mainly of the dollar. You said earlier, when testifying in this room to questions posed by another member, that another country could also buy into the reserve. I believe China may have been mentioned. Is it true that China can buy into this reserve?
No, Congressman. The current contemplated reserve is to be approximately 50% dollars and a number of other currencies, euro, pound, yen, notably. And
Euro, pound, yen, and I've indicated to you earlier that we are in competition with the euro. The pound, we would be in a competition with it as well. The yen, that's the Japanese currency, we would compete there. So you have these other currencies and you have the dollar, but the question becomes, how is this going to be balanced such that it doesn't impact the marketplace itself for currency?
Congressman, I believe that the use case for Libra is such that it will be used mainly outside of the United States, although it has real solutions to real problems in the US as well. And as a result, because of the composition of the reserve, we believe that the inflow to dollars will be important and as a result retain the relevance, of course, of the dollar.
Well, our dollar is a currency that is preeminent outside of the United States. So saying to me that this is something that will impact things beyond our borders does not give me the level of comfort I need when my concern is with a dollar, which seems to transcend boundaries. Any place in the world that you happen to visit, the dollar is available to you. There are countries that prefer the dollar to their own currency. So I'm still asking for more, and if you'll send me something, I'll be more than honored to peruse it, and I will yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Congressman.
The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gooding, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here today. Mark Zuckerberg came in front of Congress in April 2018, and Facebook established its blockchain division in May of 2018. Does that sound accurate?
Yes, we started this journey in May 2018, Congressman.
And you served on the board of directors for Coinbase, which is a $1 billion digital currency exchange, from about December of 2017 to August of 2018. Is that accurate?
That is accurate, Congressman.
So would it be accurate to say that you're more or less an expert on this and you understand how this works, how these exchanges, Bitcoin, blockchain, et cetera, things that many of us are not experts on, you're pretty proficient?
I would say that's accurate, Congressman, yes.
Going down that line, you would also say that you know how profitable this can be, right?
Congressman, yes, I believe that we have a good opportunity if we enable more people to participate, to offer services that could generate revenues.
But this is supposed to be a nonprofit operation, isn't it?
Oh, I'm talking about the Libra wallet, which will directly impact Facebook.
It is going to be a nonprofit?
No, Libra is a for-profit entity, and it is the entity that will build the wallet that will be offered to Facebook consumers.
And so is digital currency illegal in certain parts of the world? Can you touch on that?
Yes, Congressman. There are a limited number of countries that prohibit buying and selling or using digital currencies.
I also want to mention privacy violation concerns, things that Americans have been concerned with. The American consumers, would you say, do they trust Facebook? Do they feel comfortable with your company?
Congressman, I believe we have a lot of work to do to earn people's trust, and clearly we have definitely to make those very strong commitments when it comes to privacy and make good on those commitments for very long periods of time.
So I guess one of my concerns I share, I think it's bipartisan, we're a little concerned. I don't object to innovation, and this sounds very exciting potentially, but there's a level of distrust with Facebook just because of some of the things that have taken place over the last year. Would you be able to tell us if the CEO plans to come and testify before us as this thing goes down the road?
Congressman, I can't speak to that, but I'm leading this project, and I'm here today, and I plan to continue to engage appropriately.
Thank you. I yield back.
The gentlewoman from California, Ms. Porter, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Hello, Mr. Marcus. Thank you for your patience during long testimony today. I want to look back at the history as we try to understand what might become of our future with Libra. Are you familiar with the term Wildcat Bank or the free banking era?
I am, Congresswoman.
So I want to explain to everybody the basic concept that a Wildcat Bank was a bank that was chartered under state law back before banks were federally regulated from about 1836 to the mid-1860s. And they were called Wildcat Banks, according to one theory, because they were in locations so remote that you may see wildcats. The point is that Wildcat Banks were ultimately unreliable. They became known for distributing worthless currency and putting customers at risk. And as a result of that, in 1863, we enacted in Congress the National Banking Acts. How is the basic concept of a single currency pegged stable coin, the Libra, where an issuer will take dollars and give digital banknotes and vice versa, fundamentally different from the banknotes of wildcat banks, where banks took US-backed dollar coins in exchange for their own paper money, which could and often did become worthless?
Congresswoman, I believe that the very important distinction here is that the reserve will be a one-for-one reserve. I understand that the banks and the issues that arose from the wildcat banks are actually that they went into fractional reserves and as a result had inappropriate reserves to back the value of the currencies they were issuing.
Good point, Mr. Marcus. Who will be, which regulator will be responsible for ensuring that the association maintains that one-to-one reserve? Will it be the FDIC?
Congresswoman, this is a concern we have as well, and we believe that the association will need to have the right oversight and meet the satisfactory bar for oversight and how it guarantees that it cannot deviate from a full one-to-one reserve.
So it'll be self-regulation? Isn't that what the wildcat banks were also doing, and that's how they then drifted into fractional reserve? And there was no oversight or knowledge of this, which is why customers put their money in those wildcat banks, because they believed, perhaps wrongly, that there was a one-to-one reserve, or that their money was safe. Without the FDIC guarantee, isn't this just exposing people to the same? Aren't you creating yesterday's problem tomorrow again?
We are not, Congresswoman, but I do share your concerns, and that's why I believe that having the proper oversight, not self-regulation, at the association level, notably on the reserve, is important. And I want to go further. What I would like is for any consumer at any given point in time when they hold a Libra to have full transparency of the value of the reserve backing the Libra coin at any given point in time.
But that's always, respectfully, that's always what we believe about banks. I mean, that if we go to get our money, it will be there. But that's precisely why we have banking regulations, so that in fact the consumer's expectation is true. I wondered if I could ask you, I know with Libra it's going to be pegged to a basket of currencies, about 50% dollars, I believe you just heard my colleague say, and 50% like weirdly sized paper currency from a few different other countries. So it sounds a lot like what's in my daughter's piggy bank, which is kind of a mix of US dollars and money she's been given from friends who've come back from countries. What's to stop the association from changing the contents of the basket to say 100% Venezuelan bolivars at the stated exchange rate? And that would again have the effect of making the Libra currency worthless.
Congresswoman, that is why we believe that we need the right oversight for the reserve. The basket
What is
will
the
be
right
determined-
oversight?
Proper regulation, and we
By
believe
whom?
To be determined by the G7 working group in collaboration.
Well, let's run through some and see if you like any of these. FDIC?
Congresswoman, we will not engage in banking activities. As a result, I don't think that FDIC...
You're going to take people's US dollars, give them something that you're going to call currency, and you don't call that banking activity. Do you call it money changing activity? Because we do have laws that apply to money changing.
Congresswoman, you have my commitment that we will have the proper oversight and regulatory oversight of the association, notably on the key issue of the reserve. But
And respectfully, Mr. Marcus, this is not a personal thing at all, but I had the commitment of so many bankers in my lifetime that they would do the right thing by homeowners they foreclosed on, that I have to have better than that. I just wanted to, my last 5 seconds, suggest that you check out 18 U.S. Code 486, which makes it a crime to create private money that is metallic coin. I don't see why that criminal statute doesn't also inhibit the creation of digital coin. Thank you.
The gentlewoman's time has expired. The gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Clay, who is also the chair of the Subcommittee on Housing, Community Development, and Insurance, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Marcus, could you discuss where you believe Libra ranks on the scale of global innovation? Is it akin to Facebook, email, or is it merely a new way to move money similar to PayPal or Square?
Congressman, at this point, it's an idea and a concept. I hope it is very successful, because if it is, many people will benefit from it. So I hope it's going to be a big success for the very people that we hope to serve.
Thank you for that. Will Libra holders be subject to counterparty risk if the reserves are mismanaged?
Congressman, the reserve will be one-for-one, and we need to find the proper oversight so that it remains one-for-one.
Under what circumstances could a holder of Libra lose their money? I mean, what would...
Congressman, for instance, if they use a wallet that do not offer consumer protections, but in the case of the Calibra wallet, we will offer full consumer protection in such a way that if you encounter fraud or have issues, we will make you whole.
And so there would be some kind of insurance for the customer.
Correct. It's going to be something that is part of our consumer protection program when it comes to the Calibra wallets.
My colleagues have already discussed systemic risk, but I'd like to dig a little further. What are your thoughts about having a separate regulator who would only regulate digital currencies such as Libra?
Congressman, it is not for me to say who should regulate us, but my commitment is that we will meet all regulation and work with and consult with regulators and lawmakers to ensure we do this right.
And of course, the customer would pay a premium for the regulation. Is that how you envision that?
I'm not sure I understand your question, Congressman.
Well, someone would have to stand up and fund a regulator. So how would that be paid for? Would you have any ideas or thoughts on that?
Congressman, this is not my province.
Okay, let's go to another subject. What guardrails would be in place to prevent a run on the Libra currency?
We have a one-for-one reserve, Congressman. As a result, a run on the bank would be impossible, provided the reserve remains one-for-one, and we hope to have the right oversight to ensure that it remains that way.
Would portfolio managers be incentivized to seek higher returns on their investments for Libra Association members?
Are you talking about the Libra currency itself? Or because the Libra currency is designed to be stable, and as a result, it will not have appreciation. It's designed to stay stable.
And the association members are the investors, right?
Correct. Association members invest in the ecosystem in order to kickstart the Libra network.
And so they would make a return on their money how?
Congressman, my apologies for not understanding your question the first time around. Okay. The way that investors make their money back is by having a portion of the income that is generated by the reserve after it has paid all of the costs for the Libra Association.
I see. I see. Those. Thank you for your responses, and I will yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. The committee will now take a 5-minute recess to set up the second panel. I'd like to thank, so sorry, I should have thanked you first, Mr. Marcus. I apologize. This is the first time I'm chairing this committee, but I'd like to thank you so much for coming before this committee. And again, we'll take a 5-minute recess to set up for the second panel. Thank you. The committee stands in recess.